Today I'm going to show you how to butcher a sheep. Welcome to another episode of Naylor's Boomerang Adventures, and I've had a little break from doing the content creation stuff for a while, and now I'm back into it again. So if you've missed me, it's good to see you again. I am doing another how-to video. I haven't done one of those for quite a while, so I thought I'd pull one out and see how it goes. This week I'm going to be butchering a sheep from basically the start of the carcass to cutting up a complete side of the sheep to make it presentable into the kitchen. Welcome to any new subscribers, and please give me a thumbs up, and also there's a big heap of crows. Also what do? Yeah, turn on your notifications and all that sort of thing. Also, I've got a Facebook page, and I have a group link to that called Nature, Survival and Bushcraft. So if you want some more sort of detailed stuff on how to survive out in the bush and those types of things, come across and check out the group, and I'll sign you up. You've just got to answer a few questions first. And yeah, I hope you enjoy the episode, and I'll catch you at the end of it. Alright, I'm in my favourite shed again. Now, it's been 3 nights, so the carcass has been hanging for 3 nights, so it should start to relax and the meat will be just right. And well, I might as well just get right into it. My fridge that I hang them up in is like an old, that's a converted, like a bottle fridge or a sort of Coke can fridge, and came out of a, like a, I don't know what you call them in other parts of the world, we call them a milk bar over here, and it's can take 3 carcasses, and I've already butchered 2 sheep yesterday morning, and I've just saved one for the episode today, and got a little rail there, and it's long enough to take a fairly big animal, and down the bottom I just put a bit of sawdust just to take up any drops of blood or fat or anything like that, to keep it a bit fresher. And yeah, just got to pick it up and get it out of here. It's a pretty big carcass, this one. It's probably nearly a 30 kilogram lamb, and it's well set. Fat has done its job, and now I've just got to hang it up. I need a bit of help from my favourite cameraman, so just a second. Now, first thing we've got to do, always take that out because your saw's not going to work too well if it cuts through a bit of steel. I'm going to be using my meat and bone saw, so I'll just get that here. It's a proper butcher's saw, and yeah, designed to go through bone and not get blunt. Good butcher's knife. The first thing you do, you take the tail off, and so you cut both sides of it and down, and then break that. She comes off like that. That's not bad meat, but there's mainly fat on it. And then make a slice down there through the middle of the pelvis. Then you've got to just take your coat off. So you cut through this part here. That. You've got to find the middle of the spine. But you're going to cut this thing in half, both sides and out to the left and the right, like that. So on the very middle of the spine, And then because of the fat down the spine, you can't actually find the middle. When you're cutting on this side, you've got to go around the other side because you can see the middle a lot more easily. But because this animal's so fat, I've got to pull the intestinal fat out of the way first. So I've actually left the kidneys in from when it was slaughtered. So just come and have a look around here. That fat in there, that's the 2 kidneys. Rip them out. So I can, that's good tallow fat, and I'll show you what to do with that later. And so now, tear down the middle. And if you're doing it right, you should hear a little bit of clicking as you go. It means you're following the middle of the spine. So I'm going a little bit off centre, so if you go off, it's a bit hard to see through that fat. Just push it apart a bit, try to lean your saw back this way. In this case, I might have to go on the other side and just help it go back. It's good to learn how to use a saw left and right handed. You get tired if you use one hand the whole time. And sometimes a different angle from the other side of your body is a better option. Quite difficult to cut this because the sheep has a twist in it from when it was pushed up against the other sheep inside the fridge. So the spine's bending like that. It's quite difficult to stay on line, but we'll manage. So one thing I forgot to do that you should is you got to cut the neck off, because by the time we get down to the bottom, you don't want to be cutting the neck in half through the centre. So you actually basically find the base of the neck and then go maybe a centimetre or half an inch above that spot, and just cut straight through here. And that's your first bit of meat. I'll keep going down the spine. Right. There we go, 2 halves. A little bit rough because that spine was twisted. Very difficult to stay on line. Ideally, you don't have any of that meat showing up the bone all the way down, but it's okay. You won't notice because that part becomes chops. So, right, now we've got to do the front legs first. Cut through there. You cut through the meat and the bone. It's what we call a shank. And then the other shank. Looks as good as the real thing. Now, first cut for 4/4. So you got to count 5 ribs up. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then in the next gap, the intercostal space, and it's a very fatty sheep. It's hard to cut through. So and you put your hand there, and you should be able to crack that up like that. Now on a smaller sheep, that'll actually snap off with a little bit of help from your knife, but this is a bigger sheep. You have to cut through that cartilage. Okay, it's our first big cut. That's called 4/4. We'll trim that up in a little bit. I'll cut down the first half side and then trim it up. So with this is the loin. So you need to, so this is the bottom end of the tail, well the spine, where it stops here, that curve stops. Do one more joint, and then you cut through that spot there. This gets your loin. This is where your chops come from. Go around there. Okay, so you shouldn't have to cut through the bone with the saw for that. Now for the leg, but before we cut the leg off, we get that bit of flappy stuff there. This meat's a little bit bitter in this spot, so you cut that off. So without cutting into the muscle there, this area here is all sort of undesirable meat and fat, so I'll give that to the dog. You could certainly eat it if you wanted to, if you got a taste for it, but I don't eat it. Because this is a soft hang or a soft stretch method, so where you hang it up through the pelvis when you're hanging it for the days you use to tenderise the meat, or to make the meat go tender. There's a slightly different spot you got to cut through here to get to the bone to show that, well, basically to cut it off the shank, as compared to a, I'm not sure what the other stretch is called, traditional stretch, where you hang it from in here, where the leg goes straight. So for the soft stretch, it's about there. You can make a cut there, heading back towards the knee, the joint. And you're trying to get back to where the cruciate ligament goes through the knee. Yeah. So in there, you're basically boning, or sorry, you're jointing this spot. So in there is the ligament. You've got to cut through that. You should get through. This is actually very cold meat. It's almost frozen. There you go, got it. So there. So I don't need to saw that either. And the last bit is our other shank, our rear leg shank. Now, so this is called quartering a sheep. So it doesn't end up in 4 main parts, it actually ends up in 6. So for some reason it's called quartering. So that's your 4/4, that's your leg, and that's your loin. So the 4/4 becomes a 4/4 roast, and you got to get rid of this brisket. That's called the brisket, and you just cut it off. So look on the other side. Look where the meat is going to start here. So you aim for on the other side. You aim for the saw to go through that area there. That's the brisket. Now you can eat that. There's not much meat on it. It's got a lot of fat, but it's not bad eating. And now you just got to cut through these chops at the top, so between the ribs. There should be a lot more bone, that spot there, because I did such a bad job of cutting it up. It isn't there, but it'll be on the other side, the other half. There you go. And while you go along, you can trim all this stuff up here, make it a bit nicer. See any glands there? That's actually that's a gland. That's part of the lymphatic system. And I'd say a lot of people don't like to chew on that, so cut that sort of stuff off. And this stuff here, this tendon that runs along the back of the neck, or the back, along the backbone of the sheep, you can cut that out too. That helps them hold their head up. Because they're horizontal sheep, they need a big long tendon to keep that head up. They're a horizontal animal. So, yeah, cut that off. And then the brisket, if you want to do it, you can do brisket chops. And you just got to sort of cut between them. Because this is more cartilage, you can use the meat cleaver, because it's not going to leave so many bone or any bone chips behind if you're just cutting through cartilage. So I don't like to use the meat cleaver when it comes to bone, because you could be crunching down on bone chips later on in your meal. So for cartilage, that's fine. So find a bit between the chops. And also, when you use a cleaver, you aim to hit your whatever you're cutting with this part of the cleaver here. If it's going through a bit of a beefy part, then you use a bit of force. It just gives you a lot more leverage or weight somehow in that spot, rather than up at the top or halfway. It gives you more control. Go. Now the leg, you can leave that as it is. It's a big leg, and if you've got a large family, it's probably fine just like that. But if you have just a couple of people you want to feed or whatever, you definitely want to cut this in half, unless you want to be eating cold meat for a week. So you can cut it through, and I don't really want to do it because I actually want to keep this leg as a whole, but you cut it through I guess the femur, if that's what it's called on the sheep. That's the start of it there. So you cut through that part there like that, and you use your saw. Use a saw to do that. But I'll cut up the chops now. So take that meat out. That's more intestinal fat, which is great for making tallow. It's an excellent butter replacement. You just have to render it down, which is basically you put it in a slow cooker, and then after a few hours you're left with the fat goes to the bottom, and the crackle comes to the top, which you can eat as well. So, chops. So I cut up the bit without the ribs first, and then the ribs last, because it's just easier to do it that way. So you cut off any, that's an artery there, a bit of the artery, get rid of that. Any other unpleasant looking stuff, like that's a bit of the diaphragm. So cut the shape and the width that you want in your chops. At this end, at the other end of the loin, where the ribs are, the ribs dictate the width of the chop. So you don't have any choice, so you have to follow the ribs, in between the ribs. Unless you're using a bandsaw, one of these, but I don't want to use that today because I want to show you how to do it just like with a saw and a knife, and so you can do it out in the bush or something without making a big investment. Now about the flies, those little flies that you often see me swatting away from my face, they're only bush flies, and they don't really blow the meat or make the meat maggot infested, but it's the blowflies and the green bottles that will completely ruin your meat. So you need to get up early in the morning or do it on a cold day and there's no blowflies around. They're that common that people call them a butcher's bee because they hang around the butchers. So I'll often get up at, say, the crack of dawn. If it's going to be a hot day, you've got to get up at the coolest time of the day, just before sunrise, beat the blowflies, or dunny budgies is another name for them. You've got to beat the blowflies to the meat, otherwise they'll lay live maggots, as in they're not eggs, they're actually, don't have to hatch out, they'll just be ready to wriggle and start tunnelling in. So you need to beat them, otherwise you're going to spoil the meat or have to cut big bits out that they've wrecked. And then you get it in the fridge as soon as possible before they'll come out and spoil the meat. But today's a cold day, so it's, you know, middle of the morning, it doesn't matter, and it's moving into winter, so it's okay. Yeah, just a little lesson on flies. So it's actually the start of our bones there. So that's it there. Okay, so we'll cut those off. You might, it's just, because we've got not enough bone there, it's not holding. Cut that through and do it separately, which is what I didn't want to do. Doesn't matter. To do all this, you will need a block as well. It's so much easier if you just got something, a bench like this, and this set up to work off with a bar across here, like wood with a slot in it. Yeah, you have to have it. Okay. So we can cut through those like that. Oop, I lost it. So that is our chops. and ready to go on the barbie. And you can use those, you can eat that too, that's fine, that stuff. It does taste a little bit different. It's got the abdominal muscle of the sheep, which is, if it was a pig, that's what you turn into bacon. So it is different flavour, even on a sheep. And yeah, a lot of people cut it off and give it to the dogs, but I could keep it aside and do a bit of cook up later and see what it tastes like. Now the other side of the loin, or the rib side of the loin, we cut through the ribs about there. Depends how long you want your chops. So there are your rib chops, that part there. I'll just get rid of the rest of the flap off, and I'll give that to the dog. And these are quite nice. They're a bit fatty, but it's good quality meat. Using the heel of the cleaver again. There. And you put it in the oven just like that, and then when it's cooked you slice them, and you can have separate chops, or you can cook them on the barbecue. Continue to slice them through with the knife. I just had to cut through the cartilage, then it joins it together, and so you can keep cutting through with the knife, but I'll leave it like that because I'm going to put it in the oven. So we're finished cutting through the rest of these chops. On such a big animal, these chops done in this style, like following the gap between the ribs, they are a bit fatter than probably a lot of people would like, but you're not going to be able to cut down those with a bone saw in any hurry, unless it's one of those band bone saws. So they just take a little bit longer to cook, and there's a bit more meat on them. I see how they're a bit fatter than what you'd probably get from a shop. But yeah, that's okay. It just takes longer to cook. And is that done? Now I've done that. Alright, we'll do the shanks. It's good to just to crack the bone open on the shanks, because often you'll slow cook these and you've got to get that bone opened up and exposed to the heat a bit better, and it cooks it a bit faster. So cut through the bone about there, like that, and that's how you do it. And cut through that, but I like to leave the bone on because I do make a bone broth, and it's really nice. And on the front shank, that, just like that. And the neck, you just trim a bit of these bloody bits off, make it a bit nicer, and you can slow cook that as it is, or you can go through and make chops out of it. But it's quite difficult to do it with the hand bone saw, because as you get towards the end, you can't hold on to that much meat and bone. So I just cut off the end bit that is sort of not that attractive looking. Like that. Give that to the dog and just slow cook that whole thing as it is. The meat will just fall off the bone. It's some of the most tender meat on the animal. And now I think we're done as far as, well, got the tail. Slow cook that as well, that tastes pretty good, but it is a bit fatty. So that's half a sheep done. And it's, we've got, how many chops? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 17 chops of, and they're thick chops too. And I'm no butcher, so there's probably a butcher watching me now shaking his head, but I'm more focused on putting food on the table and doing a great job here. And I'm a little bit rushed, so I'm taking less time over this than what I usually would. But so I do this about once a month or so, once every 6 weeks, and it's kind of an eventful thing. It can be a family thing. All the children can be involved, and the slaughtering of the animal is a whole different process, and it's a different skill set. This butchering is it's an apprenticeship, so there's a lot to learn, but this is basically the basic way to prepare a side of a sheep to a spot where you can shrink it down and put it in the freezer or the fridge and cook it up later. So that's how it's done. Well, I hope you enjoyed the episode. I'm going to be doing a few more crafty type things from now on, not just focusing on nature, so it'll bring another aspect to the channel. And so yeah, look out for that kind of content, and I'll see you on the next episode.